welcome back, ladies. Our favorite day of the week. Sorry, guys. We're here. Always on time. Never late, always on time. Always on time. Hello, welcome back, you guys. It is another week of That's What She Said. I would say, I don't even know what time it is. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have been on back to back meetings literally all day long. So I am so grateful and so thankful that Patty this morning was like, oh, no, I got this. I know exactly what we're talking about today, exactly what we're going to do. Because Lord knows, I literally said a prayer this morning. I said, I don't know how I'm going to get all this stuff off my plate today. So thank you for taking that off my plate today, Patty. You came through. So another week of That's What She Said. Patty, what are we doing today?
So as I tell you guys often, we need silent time and focus time to read. So I've been reading this book, a brand new book. My team and I read a book together, and every week we meet and we discuss insights from the book, both personally and professionally, how we can apply them. And this book, I got a couple good recommendations, and I'm listening to The Psychology of Money, but I'm currently reading this book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. Okay. And first of all, the speed of trust. I mean, it's intriguing as it is, but it really emphasizes how important and how valuable trust is. And I want to share a quote from the book that so far I just started this book, guys. But this one, I don't know what it was about it that really felt powerful. And the quote is that the moment there's a suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted. And that's from Mahatma Gandhi. So the moment there's suspicion about someone's motive, everything he does becomes tainted. That's an experience we have both professionally and personally when you are so enamored by someone, or you might feel so inspired by who you think someone is. And then the moment you see something, it could be a little white lie, or it could be just the way they treated a stranger, or how someone might treat a waitress or a cleaning person at a hotel. All of those little things can completely change the way you see that person, and they become tainted. So trust is such an incredibly important factor, both professionally and personally. Our goal of this show is always to talk about and share what we wish we would have known when we were younger. And it really takes some maturity in life and in business to understand that it takes decades to build trust and seconds to break it and ruin it. And the reparation of that is extremely difficult. And just all of a sudden, all these Jay-Z lyrics are coming to mind about this, but I'm going to stop right there and let you take it and go ahead and lead us through this conversation.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts. When you brought this up, I was like, wow, what a impactful thing. I think that there's like many things that we talk about on the show. There's many different facets and angles to look at something. So one of the things that you brought up was trust in self. And I know that in our show notes, you wanted to kick this to Nasima first. So I did find a stat, though, to kick you off, Nasima, that said only 30% of adults globally say that most people can be trusted. And which goes to further emphasize this idea, this importance of self-trust as a foundation, right? Before extending trust to others. So you're someone who's built a whole brand off of just kind of instinct, right? You really, I don't know when you started this, your goal was to be some super influential person, but you have learned kind of really self-preservation in this process as well. So talk to us about that relationship with trust in yourself first to start us off.
Yeah. And I think that stat is very interesting. And it just highlights that a lot of times people think that because they can't trust themselves, because oftentimes we lie to ourselves over and over. And so that relationship is broken early on. And what does it look like to lie to yourself? Like, oh, you say you're going to stay on a consistent diet. You're going to work out consistently. You're going to get better with your finances. You're going to budget. And then next thing you know, you're falling back into those same things that you were doing before. So that creates a cycle of trust. It creates a cycle of distrust within yourself. And so people are just like, well, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I'm just not even going to try. And what I had to get really good at is trusting myself. And just like you don't start distrusting yourself overnight, it is a process. And the way that I encourage other people and the way that I built up that self trust was by habit tracking, right? Like continuously doing things over and over and saying that I can do those things and having some accountability by, marking it off on a spreadsheet or having a group where I'm saying like I'm day such and such of doing these things. And in order to hack that, people think that they have to do something extraordinary, like they have to lose 100 pounds or all these kind of things. It could be as simple as every day in the morning, I'm going to make up my bed for 30 days.
Mhm.
And then you build on something else. Every day in the morning, I'm going to drink a glass of water before I do anything, right? And then you start to believe in yourself. And I don't often share this story, but the reason why I was able to start my platform is because um when I was going on my personal finance journey on my own in the very beginning, well, not on my own, I was married, and my husband ended up going to jail for abuse. But well, abuse was one of the things that he went to jail for. But we were still married, so I still used to write to him in a journal every day. And I wrote in the journal and I told him about our day. I told him about like the progress that I was making financially, like the things that I was doing to make sure that we would be cool. And, after everything was said and done and, the relationship ended up like going south, I was just like, if I can do that, but it's a ninja, you
Mm.
know, I can instill those habits into building a platform that can help other people.
Mhm.
And that action of just writing intentionally every day, never missing a day, filling a whole journal gave me the momentum to be able to continue to go on my journey and not hiccup when things were going awry with my marriage and everything that falls apart, that you could just like throw up your hands and say I can't do this. But it also gave me the momentum to know that I can build a community by just sharing little things as often as possible. And initially it was every day. So those things, like I said, like it's hacking your mindset, right? Those little mindset hacks are the things that drive you to create that momentum. Now, when I was in the middle of paying off debt, number one, I was tracking it and I was sharing it, but it seemed like it would be forever. And I was just like, "Oh my god." But at the end of the day, it only took a little under 3 years to pay off nearly $1,000,000 in debt. And let me tell you, even though I was tracking like this is how much debt, I was like, "Oh, I have this much debt left, this much debt left, this much debt left." It wasn't until I had to apply to go to a retreat that I actually went back and calculated from the beginning how much debt I had actually paid off, and it ended up being nearly $1,000,000. But it was those small that was I call it the aggregation of marginal gains, those small daily actions that made the bigger impact. And I was talking to my friend the other day, and he's writing a book about purpose and about what people say, when they're on their deathbed, and he talks about like what's really important. And a lot of times people think that they have to hit these like big, he calls it big P purpose, like these like I want to become the president, I want to become an astronaut, instead of focusing on those little P purposes, those things you can do every day that accumulate and actually in the long run add up to something so much more substantial than what you could have thought. So, that's my way. Doing those little P purpose things every day is my way of instilling that self trust. So
I mean, I gotta say something about that. So the reason why I thought it would be important to start with self trust is because everything starts with the foundation of yourself. The
yes,
very first
yes.
business you ever manage is yourself, and if you can't keep the promises that you're making to yourself, if you're not who you say you are, and you're not showing up, like I can come here and tell you I'm all kind of things, but if I'm not showing up in that capacity for myself, then it's going to be a lot harder to build trust outside of that, right?
Yep.
Because you're not who you say you are. And nobody knows that better than the reflection in the mirror. So, for example, for those of you who don't know, who might be listening for the first time, Nassima has paid off, like she said, almost $1 million of debt in under 3 years. Nassima doesn't own 6 businesses. Nassima doesn't have a inheritance. Nassima has a job as a nurse. So that means that she's getting taxed on that money, and she's doing that with her after-tax dollars on top of raising children. And as she just mentioned, her partner wasn't anywhere to be found, right? So, you don't build the confidence, you don't build the trust, because confidence can actually be used synonymously with trust as you get into the definition a little bit more. You don't build the confidence without the small deposits that you make every single day with yourself, such as, like you said, and I felt like you were attacking me about people and getting on diets and breaking them. So thank you for that. There's no need to get personal on the show. Okay. So we're like, I always tell me that, like, I'm like, damn, I don't know why my kids are always trying to eat, because every time I go in the kitchen, if I got to cook something, I'm going to eat something. And it's like, why do I not?
You just happen to be an amazing cook. So I know
it's so stressful to just be good at that, loving the food. So it's such a stressful thing, but I've broken my trust with myself time and time again over that topic. Waking up at a certain time, telling myself I'm the type that wakes up at 5 a.m. and getting up at 6. All those little things, you don't have the self-confidence and the trust in yourself if you're not doing the things that you promised yourself. Just think about that. Look around you. There's not a soul on the planet that's more important than you living in your own body for the sake of your goal and your purpose in the relationship. So I just have to say, that's why I thought it was so important to start with self-trust with someone who tackled almost $1 million of debt in under 3 years with limited resources and no outside assistance. I think that's phenomenal. I think you can't do that without a trusting relationship with yourself, because you could have been like, F it, I can defer these payments. I can get some sort of assistance here. I can ask my mom for help. I could do this. I can do it. No, you attacked that pressure and you lived up to the promises that you made to yourself. Like I just couldn't think of a better example to talk about self-trust.
Okay, I don't know who this is, but welcome to That's What She Said. I love you in these comments. Thank you so much for these comments. Confidence is not built on praise, it's built on competence. That's deep. That's really, really deep. Nassima, something that you said really stuck out. Obviously, you said a lot of impactful things just now, but when you just said you were journaling every day and accomplishing things for the sake of the relationship, and then you had this aha moment where you were like, wow, I could do this for myself. I think that that's really, really deep, because a lot of people never find the energy or the self-value or worth to do things for themselves in that way, right? A lot of people who are caregiving and doing things for other people all of the time, right? Like all of us on this call in very many ways. I actually recently had that aha moment where it's like, wow, I had to assess all of the people that I've helped, all of the people that I've made money for and with, and people whose operations that I've helped, and deliverables I've been able to add to, and businesses I've made better, and relationships I've made better. And there comes this moment where, sometimes we look, for that next thing to be put on. If only I get this right opportunity, then it'll be about me. If only I, get seen the way that I want to, I'll get to where I'm going. When the reality is that all of that power already lies within you. So I felt like that was a really profound thing that you had said there, Nassima. Thank you for calling that out. I think a lot of people, women in particular, don't realize that you have that power already to do it for yourself. So yeah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Let's make it cheers. I feel like today I need something stronger than the coffee in my cup at this point, but anyway, that's really, really, really good. So, okay. So we're talking about self-trust. Oh, another thought I had while we were talking, discernment, right? So building that trust within yourself. For me, I think that I trust my ability to discern now. And that's a skill that we had to develop. I remember, Patty, do you remember this back on Clubhouse in 2020 when we first met? There was a room going on, and the host of that room asked everybody on the stage, what's your word for 2021 going into the next year? Patty's word on that stage 3 years ago was discernment. Over 3 years ago was discernment. Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, she's right. She's cool. But literally as that whole year went on, I was like, dude, she was right. She hit the nail on the head with that one. And so I feel like my ability to trust myself has come with my ability to discern better. There's another stat. Sorry, y'all know how I go with the stats. I was like, what are we gonna talk about today? There's another stat that says that relationships are most critical. Oh, wait, sorry. No, I'm wrong. I'll get back to it. I don't know. I got to find it. I thought that was it. That's not it. But the stat essentially talked about those who value the relationship with self actually trust their abilities to handle people more. Not that they don't trust that people will not betray them or make mistakes or hurt them, but more so in their ability to manage those things when you trust yourself more. So, just adding that as well. Okay.
And the transition from here is, so you're building your self-trust, obviously in a 1 hour platform. We could talk about just what Naseema talked about for the entire hour. But Kelani, the second element of this I think we wanted to approach here is this idea that you often talked about delegation, right? So delegation is extremely important and a powerful tool in a small company that you're building, in large companies, of course, but small company. So in our group or in our audience, we're hoping to target folks that are new to entrepreneurship, maybe younger to building their businesses, maybe older and starting over again, maybe older and transitioning, right? So in the very fundamental stages of any business, for example, in a real estate agent who has a real small business, an individual person, they might say, I can't afford to hire an assistant. And someone seasoned like myself will turn to them and say, no, you actually can't afford not to. Because what you don't understand is what you're spending there for the tasks that you're taking 4 hours to complete is time that you're losing to go out and do income generating activities, which would be the highest and best use of your time. So in delegation, there's a lot of trust that's required. It's not an instant thing. You don't find someone right away. So in terms of building Women in Real Estate, which is a nationwide platform that provides endless resources to women in real estate, how is it that you have found trust in the ability to delegate certain aspects of your business so that you can drive growth?
That's wow. Trust is built over time, like you said, and it's lost. It's lost in seconds, right? So I think from a leadership standpoint, I'm going to answer that through the lens of leadership. It's always been my way of operating to be the example. It's important to me to show up for people the way that I want them to show up for me, and even in ways that maybe they didn't expect for me to show up. And so when I think about trust with someone, I think about the deposits that I've made into them and into the relationship to a point where I know that I'm valuable to you. I know that I've helped you. I know that I've uplifted you. I've empowered you. I've given opportunity. I see your potential. I pour into you because that's the culture of our company. That's just the culture. That's how we operate, right? And knowing that that's valuable, I trust that not to F this up. Okay, that's number one. I feel like it's number one. It's too good of a scenario and an opportunity. And just like I value you, you're too important to me to want to F this up, right? That's not a one-sided thing. The reason that I can give so freely and pour so freely and teach and encourage is because it's valuable. I also learned that there's really not much damage someone can do that I can't fix, right? So in trusting, I learned that it's not about just trusting you a little bit. I don't like give people a little bit of trust and make them earn a little bit more and a little bit more. You get all my trust. You have it until you don't have it. And that for me, I would appreciate that in return as well. And so when it talks about trust within the organization, man, this is just something this year I've learned that you really just need people. If you want to move with velocity, you have to trust people. And there's nobody in my organization they could make the worst mistake ever. And it's likely not something that I can't fix and help them learn and make them a better professional at the same time. I don't know if I answered that question well or where you were looking to go with that, but for me, that's how it starts.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point theoretically, right? And I think for a practical way of thinking about it is if you're building a business and the trust aspect and delegation, in my opinion, and anyone chime in, is that you build a system, right? So if I were building cars and these two ladies were on my team and we were building together, each one of them have a separate section. So let's say I work on the engine, Nasima's working on the trunk, and Kelani's working on the hood, the front end of the car, right? Each one of us, so when we started, we get a handbook, and that handbook is giving us really clear instructions of exactly what we need to do. So if God forbid Nasima's not there anymore, or she just goes on a vacation and John steps in and says, I'm taking Nasima's place today, she can read that same book and conduct the same tasks so that the assembly line remains intact. So when you're delegating, I think a part of that is the conceptual aspects that Kelani talked about. I've created something that I love. I've created something of value. You should feel valuable as a part of this organization and be committed to the follow through. That's great in theory. So now we're talking about the practicality of it. So when you're delegating, you can trust someone to the extent at which you've trained them and given them the resources to do their job. Now, the reason why I use the word
I disagree. Finish your thought, but I'm going to disagree.
Well, you can disagree, sure. So when you give someone this job and you say, hey, this is what you are to do, right? And you talked about velocity. So we're talking about speed and efficiency and getting things done. So the reason why trust is extremely valuable in an organizational setting when you're building from the ground up is because you save money and you save time when you can trust the people that you're working with. So, for example, the idea that if there's a mistake made, I can fix it, I think is a noble idea. Because what you're saying is, I've trusted someone to do something. If they make a mistake, I'm not so much worried about it because I can go and train them and fix them to do it, right? But the idea is that you trust them. There's no micromanaging. Maybe there's no repetitiveness. Maybe you don't have to keep saying the same things over and over again. Because once you can trust the system to operate efficiently, you get speed, you get more time, and you get more execution. So tell me what part of giving people clear instructions you disagree with, Kelani. I'm ready.
Yeah, I think that what you just described was trust in the system that you created, right? Because trust isn't the measure of how well someone can perform a task. Trust, I just looked up the definition, is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something, right? So I could create the perfect system. I could have a SOP that gives you every single step, but maybe that person's not super detail oriented and reads too fast or missed a step or made a mistake, right? Because if we're talking about mistakes and errors, there are true mistakes where I really missed something. I made a mistake. I transposed these numbers, or and then there are people that are careless and make very avoidable mistakes. Those are very two different things. Now we're talking about the character of the individual, right? Or the qualities that they possess. That is where my trust lies. When I hire, I'm not hiring strictly on core competencies or what your resume says that you can or can't do. I'm hiring on how well you fit this culture, your desire to learn. And if I can trust, when we're talking about trust, if I can trust you to call out a mistake or call out a problem before it occurs, or can I trust you to bring the problem to me when it occurs, or can I trust you to make the right decisions on behalf of us and the organization if and when those things occur? That's where my trust lies. So that's the part about that I disagree with. I feel like trust is different than putting someone into a system and saying, boom, here you go. Because if you put me on trunk duty in that car analogy, and I'm gonna be honest with you, trunk duty is a lot easier than engine duty. So you probably feel like you are working your ass off. You're working really hard, figuring out all of the mechanics, the electrical, all of the things. I'm on trunk duty. Nasima's on hood duty. She's just buffing, working on windshield wipers, right? And you've got the brunt of that load, right? So in that scenario, you could have the perfect system, but the trust component isn't in the individual tasks. It's the ability to work as a team and trust each other in the team. So
yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we're highlighting, like, let's say we have a circle, we're talking about different parts of the circle and they all have to work together to function. So I don't think we're disagreeing. And I think that you reminded me of something really valuable I learned in a coaching session. And in that coaching session, I learned that as a manager, when you're building a company and you are growing, You don't manage to the person, you manage to the system. So your theory might work in a really small setting, but as you grow and as the stakes get higher, you do have to have an extremely well thought out and well documented assembly line that you're able to manage to. So for example, sometimes, Nasima, even when you had a bad day, when you were in a bad mood, you were extra emotional, extra tired, did you still make the payments according to your plan to knock out the debt?
I definitely did.
Right. So I trust you. I trust myself to do that. Now, in this organizational setting, if my team comes in and you're having a bad day, you forgot to feed your dog, you left the dog outside, your kid's crying, his first day of school, kicking his, whatever the thought might be, right? You're still coming in and there's still a job to be done. So as a manager, I have to remove myself a little bit from that personal aspect. I care. I'm a human being and I do care, but I'm managing to a system. My trust depends on the results that are created as a result of the input and export of that system, input and output, right? So for example, if you're coming in and you have X amount of tasks to do, I've got a million personal things too. We could spend the next 8 hours of our day talking about all the personal struggles that we're having, the emotional pain that we're having. Today's my father's birthday, who died 3 years ago. We can talk about all that stuff, but I'm not bringing that with me to my job, right? So there is an aspect of trust that relies on managing to the system, managing to the process, and not managing to the person. And I think both of what Kalani and I talked about has to be merged together in order to have a well-functioning machine. Yes, you do have to preserve culture. Yes, you do hire people sometimes that lack in skill set where they are excelling in character and trustworthiness, because there are some traits you can't teach people, and some people are just too good to pass up on when it comes to trust from a character standpoint. But I also need to be able to make sure that you're reliable. Being a good person doesn't mean that you can be reliable every day, to this system that I've created, that in order for me to get X results, I'm going to need X amount of inputs on a consistent basis. So we have to manage not to the person, but to the system, in my opinion.
And that system should account for variables, right? For sick days, and should account for, those moments where things happen, right? Like that system should account for those things. And that system should also probably include the kind of intangible things that we're talking about, which is hiring for the right reasons. That system needs to include that as well. So 100%. And I think there's also a part of trusting yourself in that system that you created, right? So in my business right now, right, I'm the one making the decisions for how we decide to market, how we decide to handle, leads or prospects that come into the community. I'm the one who decides how we onboard people, how do we retain people, what is their experience like? Like I'm the one who makes the final decision on what happens in those instances and scenarios, a customer's journey through our community and through our products. And so I have to trust myself in saying, okay, I understand the needs of our customer. I understand the journey and experience we want to provide to them. I have to trust myself on some of those decisions, and yes, empower people to work within that system. Because the reality is those people are also beholden to the results of the system that I'm creating. Right? If we fail, like that's the thing with being the leader, you take all of the risk and you give away all the credit. That's what Simon Sinek says, right? So I'm taking all of the risk. And if our system fails, the only person that we can blame is me, right? At the end of the day. So you have to have, what you just described, Patty, to me is indicative of a lot of self-trust as well.
100%. Yeah, I mean, what Mahela is saying in the comments here about support outside the professional field where we can process what's clouding our thought process, that goes back to where we started, right? We started with the individual, with the relationship you have with yourself. And then you have to realize that if you are failing at various different things that you're trying, it doesn't mean you're going to fail for the rest of your life. But I think you have to sometimes realize you're the common denominator and you have to take some time to heal, whether that's trauma, pain, you're not ready, whatever that is. So that's why I think Mahela is. Now, Rita is touching on something even more important. She's saying here, important for the conversation of the business side of things, which is that, my daughter needs to hear this. She has a high problem with employee turnover. Okay. So let's talk about that, because I've gone through a lot of people myself. And turnover can be a couple different things, right? You in a smaller business setting, you're going to go through a lot of people before you find the ones that stick. And in that process, the number one thing you're going to learn is how you hired. The onboarding process is literally the most important aspect of the entire process. And so if you have a high employee turnover, the very first thing I would encourage someone to look at is their onboarding process. Because people are not going to be able to read your mind. There has to be, and I'm not making any assumptions, Rita, about the situation. I'm just using your example to talk about something that's common in business. Okay. So what happens is if you have we were just talking about managing to the system and then character, right? So what Kalani said is, well, we got to take for account sick days and maybe someone's going to be out one day or this, that. That's exactly why there has to be a clear system. Because if someone is out, the other person can step in and carry that weight and keep the team lifted because there is a set system. That same system has to exist for onboarding. So I think I'm up to 12 team members now. More than half of them salaried employees, and some of them are commission paid salespeople, right? So when you're building something small and you have the turnover, the number one thing to check is the onboarding process. That means that, have I given clear instructions about what I want this position to do? Have I set the expectations that things can change? Have I also given very clear instructions with a book of resources where you can find certain answers that you're looking for? Do I have a system where I'm checking in on a regular basis to see if this person has their needs met in this setting? Because it's all easy. Imagine going to a new job. You need the job. You wouldn't have applied for it if you didn't need it. So you're sitting there working. You don't know the answers to questions, but you're also intimidated to ask because you think you need to know everything. And now you're in this seven. Are you taking that into consideration? Are we being resourceful? Are we providing resources? What does the onboarding process look like? And a part of that onboarding process is what I've learned personally is not to hire out of haste. When you're hiring out of a state of need in a way that you have to hurry up and fill a position, you are going to have problems because you're going to have to let people go because you're overlooking certain things. Or maybe you're saying, this person was really, really nice. I think I could train them, even though they don't have the skill set. Let me just take a chance on them. Then you might have another bit of high turnover. So I think through that process, I've learned a lot about raising the standards, making people meet a certain level of standards to the minimum of what we need to function properly, and really cleaning up the onboarding process. I went from very amateur, not knowing at all what I'm doing, to having a lot more success in that regard. So I think it's important if you're having a lot of turnover, or for example, you can't keep an assistant or you're not getting the results that you're looking for, to re-examine that onboarding process and the support system you give people initially. It's similar to client expectations that you said, Kalani, for setting client journey, maybe patient expectations, that when people come into the organization and you've given them a certain set of expectations, it takes a little while. They need a little hand holding, but if you do enough of that up front, you're mitigating risk for problems that occur later down the line, right? Maybe post-patient care wasn't reviewed with someone and they go and they don't know what to do or where to get their medicine, or the sale happens and you got the sale, but now that person doesn't feel supported and they don't feel like they got value from what they purchased because there's no follow-up or resources, right? We learn from those things. So I think it's extremely critical to make sure you have all of the best practices in place for onboarding, to make sure people have the tools and systems that they need, have the resources that they need, they know where to get what they need, and then give them a chance to acclimate and then judge whether or not they're going to be there. But I guarantee, whether it's a customer or an employee, there's a lot less turnover when they have clear instructions and ample resources.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And also too, I think that's it's different it varies based on the size of the organization, right? Being able to work for Patty, you can pick up the phone and call her. Being able to work for me, you can pick up the phone and call me. Our organizations aren't that big to where we're not accessible to solve our problems. In larger organizations, it can be a lot harder to navigate because you're reporting to someone who's reporting to someone who's reporting to someone who's not a decision maker. And it's hard to get support and or see change in those larger organizations where it's like turning a ship to get anything done. So I don't know the size of her organization, but that can obviously play a large role in that too. And leadership can come from people in roles that are not at the top, for the record, right? So if there's a lot of turnover and it's a larger organization, I would bet a bunch of money right now that it is likely a culture problem, 100%. So anyway, Anyway. Okay, guys, we got about 20 minutes left. I love the chat. You guys are really making me very happy in this chat. I'm loving this. Patty, I know you wanted to touch on trust from a personal perspective. Go ahead. I'm not even going to go ahead.
You're not in the mood for this one today, huh? Well, obviously we all have personal lives, right? And I think it goes without saying, we've talked about this several times, that how it takes a long time to build trust, but it takes a very little bit of time to break that trust. And I think all of us have that. So here we are, the three of us, right? I think we've built trust with each other. And of course, Lady Jade, who can't be with us today, but she'll be back. So we have four ladies who didn't spend a lot of time together. We all knew each other, sporadically. We don't spend too much time together, but we decided to come here and create a show. And that requires some trust, because I had to trust that no matter what Nasima is doing, I knew she would be the perfect addition to this show. And it doesn't matter what she has going on with her children, with school starting, with life in general, with her career. It doesn't really matter. I know that she's going to show up every time we have this show on a Wednesday on time. So what happens? What happens there after a couple months of doing this? I mean, I know the on time thing is relevant. It's CP time around here. Okay. So, but what we're talking about here is the fact that we're showing up for each other regularly, right? It's like if she calls, I'm answering the phone, and these little deposits create the trust and in these relationships. Today, I got a phone call from someone from Twitter who saw my tweet, doesn't follow me, doesn't follow anyone that follows me. He just randomly saw one of my tweets that happened to get a lot of traction. And when he saw that tweet, he's buying a $990,000 house in Hawaii. And he said, I want to see if she is who she says she is. So I'm going to call her. She answered quickly. I know she lives a nice life. This is his exact words. I know she lives a nice life. I know she's cooking. I know she's got kids. I know she's busy. I know she says this, but let me see if she's really who she says she is. So he gets on the phone with me, questions that, couldn't believe I answered the phone call, spent about an hour on him, talked through everything. Now, the credit union he's working with, their interest rate is 0.5% lower than mine for the same cost. But after I explained to him everything that goes into buying this type of property that he's buying and what he's doing, he chose to work with me, canceled with the bank, and now he's moving forward. That trust was created in less than a 1 hour phone call based on my reputation that is passively circulating the internet, and one phone call to solidify that I am who I say I am. In 1 hour, he got further in that conversation than he did in 2 weeks of working with the bank. Okay. Wow. That's one professional example for you. And then I was talking and I said, you know, what's so funny to the gentleman today? I was just talking to my good friend Kalani on the phone. And I said, you know how rare it is to find someone who is who they say they are? Pretty rare. And I said, sir, I am who I say I am. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to prove that to you.
Especially in this day and age. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm sure you recognize that a lot because you're doing business through the internet as well, where people are constantly being disappointed by putting people on a pedestal and having that trust shattered almost instantly when they're communicating with them or actually doing business with them. And I think that this character is something that's so important in our personal lives. I was using that same example when talking to Kalani today. We met, like as she said, on the internet in a chat room almost 4 years ago. And not only have we done a lot of business together, we've developed a phenomenal personal relationship together. But that didn't occur. We didn't grow as a result of failed promises, broken promises. We've grown with a lot of very real, honest, uncomfortable conversations and consistency by showing up for each other, right? And I think we don't talk about relationships enough with men and women and that dynamic. But I think that's really what the problem is that there's a lack of trust. And we don't trust ourselves enough. We don't act consistently maybe enough in our own personal lives to be able to trust other people, because it is a reflection of how you often feel about yourself. And it's easy to feel disappointed with people in the way that they behave, you know. So that's where I wanted to go with it, Kalani. And I'd love to see anyone add or kind of go from this here. But you have to remember that everyone is sizing you up, and everyone has this perception of you, and you only get one opportunity to live up to that hype. And when you ruin that, as a woman, if you're dealing with that in business or your personal life, Don't fall in love with the image of something. Don't fall in love with the promise of something. Get more grounded and accept something for the reality that it is. Because trust lasts a lot longer than the feeling of excitement and love. The feeling, not the action of love, but the feeling.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to be trusted, but they don't do a lot to earn people's trust. And for me, like, I feel like trust is everything. And that's professionally, that's in what I do in my personal finance business. But also, with my family. But as a labor and delivery nurse, most people, when they go into labor, they're in the most vulnerable, compromising state. I mean, you're all up in people's vaginas. Like, it's the most vulnerable you could ever be. Um, and it takes a lot to kind of let your shields down and let somebody in. And to me, that, like, building that trust and rapport with my patients is super duper important, and that's my everything, right? Like, it doesn't everything doesn't have to be perfect, but I need to know, and I work really hard on making sure that that person feels like I'm somebody that they can trust, that they can listen to, that can help them, that can guide them. um and so I just wish people put more effort into, like, for other people, building that trust and not thinking that people should automatically trust them. Um, because I don't know why people think people should automatically trust them. But yeah, trust is everything to me. Um, so yeah, that's all I want to say. Like, I really work hard to be the person that I represent, to show up at. And I make a lot of mistakes. But I think the thing that I'm really good at is acknowledging my mistakes, taking 100% accountability, and then trying to repair whatever damage that happened because of that mistake. And I don't think other people are so interested in doing that. So I
Let me
just
ask
wish.
you a question,
Mhm.
Nasima.
Uh-huh.
In a situation, especially because you're dealing with life or death,
Yeah.
how often do you rely on your instincts? Your
Oh,
nervous system is speaking to you. Talk to
oh,
us
all the
about that,
time.
because why is
All
it
the
as women
time.
that we compromise that?
All the time. And I think, and I'm gonna sound kind of biased here, but labor and delivery is like one of those fields that you have to rely on, and you have to be tapped in to your instincts. You have to be tapped into your gut, because yes, we have these monitors and we have these systems in place, but there's always going to be a feeling that something is going to go wrong before it happens. Or you kind of already know that, ooh, something is happening. I can't necessarily explain it before it happens. So we have to really really hone in that 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 gut feeling that we have. And it is strong in labor and delivery. But I also, what I always tell my patients is, trust your gut too, and don't be afraid to communicate that with me. Because what ends up happening is, especially when you have this power dynamic, is that people think that you know better, so they're not necessarily going to explain, or are going to speak up and say what they're feeling, because they like, no, well, she's telling me X, Y, and Z. I said, you know your body better than anybody else. You know what's going on. You have a feeling what's going on before anybody else. Don't ever be afraid to tell me, because I don't know. That's information that I need to be able to serve you, to the best of my ability. So don't be afraid. Don't think I know everything. I can't know everything, and I that's one of my biggest things. Like, I never claim to know all things. I'm a student all the time in every capacity, and anybody can be your teacher. So
Mhm.
leaving that space for people to be able to share with you, and to be able to say openly, like, this is what I'm feeling, and not shut them down, is powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, I really feel like even if I didn't hear anything you said, I felt how human that was. And I think we need to remember that the common denominator, the the guaranteed common ground that you have with everyone that you're ever going to do life or business with is that you're human. There is an instinct in your body that speaks to you. This is why trust is so important, because when it's shattered or when someone does something that taints your trust, you can't ever look at them the same way again. You can't work with them. You can't live with them. You can't trust them. You can't walk with them again. And as women especially, we make a lot of compromises for that feeling. We put that feeling aside because we want to believe that maybe it was me. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I did this. Maybe it should be like this. Maybe it could have been like that. Maybe I misunderstood. And sometimes we have to understand that your nervous system and that energy that exists in you is telling you the truth. The more centered that you can become, the more loud that truth will be. See, there is a truth that lives inside of you that speaks to you energetically. See, we should not allow ourselves to be in situations in a work environment. You might be in an elevator and you feel unsafe and you didn't listen to that feeling and you just went 6 floors with someone that could have taken your life. And you knew better. You knew better. Someone said something and you're lucky to have gone away. It could be that you're in a compromising situation at work where you've got this nagging thought in the back of your head that someone is out to get you, like they're doing something behind your back or they're laying traps for you. And you might not listen to that, right? Listen to those feelings. You might be interacting with someone of the opposite sex or someone in a relationship, and you're constantly making compromises, but in your gut, you know the truth. You know the feeling. You don't need your best friend to tell you. You don't need your mom to tell you. You don't need your girlfriends to tell you. You need to learn how to listen to that gut instinct. So closing this segment out with this trust factor, going right back to yourself. It starts and ends with yourself. You are the first business that you will ever manage. You have to learn to trust your own instincts. And when your nervous system is telling you that something is off, listen and explore that. When you can find that balance within yourself, you can find and create that balance with everything around you, whether it's work or life related.
And that, my friends, is what she said.
That is the word.
This has been so awesome. I think I liked where this conversation went for us today. Thank you for everybody in the chat going crazy. Rita, Mihaela, Apostle, Mom. Oh my gosh, you guys are killing it. Latoya, welcome in. I think Mihaela said this. Peace is the highest vibration feeling. When we do things in peace, for peace, with peace, we can hear spirit, and spirit guides us.
Love that.
I love that. And I think, this conversation could have went a whole bunch of ways, right? Because it's sort of very big integrity conversation. Nasima, you were talking about, even building trust in a matter of minutes with your patients, right? By listening to them. That's a reciprocal relationship. It's going to go on a lot of ways. And I just really appreciate the fact that we gave space to this conversation, because I think a lot of times we might be searching for peace or think that we want peace, but don't even know how to recognize it when we have it, or really know, and we'll settle for other things out of comfort or discomfort or normalcy or familiarity. And I really, really appreciated that. That was really good. I needed that today. So thank you, ladies, so much. All right, guys, we are here same time, same place tomorrow. Patty, what's tomorrow?
Next week.
Next week.
I'm sorry.
Tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is the truth behind the headlines. That's going to be more about the economy and the real estate business. I've been a mortgage banker for 21 years. You can register by using the link in the chat, pattygoodspeed.com. Oh, I don't think it let me do that. /TBTH. The truth behind the headlines. You can find me on Instagram, pattygoodspeed.com. This is something Kalani forced me to create, and it has taken off. It's very successful. It's been 2 years of consistency. Our last webinar had 202 people show up to listen to me talk about the boring economy. So come through.
It's not boring. You guys know, if you guys know us, this all started, with business and real estate. So Patty does a phenomenal job of helping us understand what's going on in the economy, how it applies to us, the housing market, all of those things. I'm just a cool sidekick on TBTH, and I get to ask the questions and have the fun, but you guys definitely don't want to miss it. I've also got an event coming up in Dallas. So anyone who's tuning in from Texas, who watches this from our Dallas The Wire chapter, we've got a big event called the Diversified Development Summit. It's happening on September 7th, diversifieddevelopmentsummit.com. I'd love to see you there. We're bringing together some of the brightest minds and diverse and women developers from across the country. So you're not going to want to miss that. Nasima, what you got? I don't know your things.
I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm relaunching my Hello Simple Investing for Kids workshop for free for people to join and finally start investing. So if you are on my newsletter, you'll hear about it. You follow me on Instagram, you'll hear about it. So stay tuned. It's happening soon.
Tap in with us on socials. We also want to hear about what you guys want to talk about. So welcome the newcomers to the show. Please join us again next week. Same time, same place. Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.